Well, welcome to the Friday Bubble. As you can see, I'm by myself today. It's the 2nd of December, and there's 2 weeks where Essie wasn't able to come here to London to do some recordings with me. So today and next Friday, I'm going to do alone, and then we'll have Essie back on I think that's the 15th. So today, we're doing Leclerc Briant. Now, some of you must have come across their Abyss champagne. They were one of the first to play with underwater submerging. So back in 2012, their first Abyss vintage went under the seas for about 12 months, and that's quite typical. So the champagne's made as normal. It comes from grapes that are particularly calcareous, particularly chalky sites. So Hervé Gestan, who's the winemaker at Leclerc Briant, has been famous for many years for following an organic route in the vineyards and very much then transitioned into biodynamics. And with this sort of third, shall we call it, evolution, I'm going to call it bioenergetics, where he's very much trying to capture some of the energy of what's around us, the sun, the moon, and really the reason he wanted to do the underwater project was all to do with the energy that's down there in the sea. And he's chosen a particular site for Abyss. So this is just off the Brittany coast. And it's a particular, he always describes it as a particular turbulent underwater environment. So these get lowered down in metal cages to about 60 meters, where they rest for anywhere, depends on the vintage, sometimes 11, sometimes 13 months. Abyss is always the same blend. It's pretty much a third of each of the 3 grape varieties. Essie, I know, has had the privilege of tasting them before being submerged and then being able to taste them against a control. So she's had one that's not gone underwater and one that has been underwater. And whenever she talks about them, she said there's a massive change in their evolution. 12 months underwater, there's virtually no pressure, because obviously at 60 meters, the 6 atmospheres or the 5.5 atmospheres of pressure in there are pretty much equalized by the pressure outdoors. The lovely thing, I always think, with these bottles is they have been underwater and they don't try and hide that. You smell the packaging that's associated with it and you get this, well, you can't describe it as anything other than the seaside character. It's just a wonderful addition, and they keep the cages on, so you can see there's a little bit of natural rust on the metal parts, and it's typical, isn't it, when I do this on live that oh no, here we go. So there we go. It always has the vintage on the cork, and you can see it's covered in barnacles and all those lovely crustaceans from the sea. But one of the things I've noticed as I've been tasting this, I usually go to Leclerc Briant. It's actually normally with Essie as well. So we normally go in the spring every year, and we get to see and taste these new releases. The one thing that's really struck in my mind is how they have evolved. And I think they've just got better and better and better. 2017, which is this new vintage, has not a great reputation. It was very difficult in the summer months, in July and August. They had a lot of rain, and the Pinot Noir, which is very susceptible to rot, was very, very difficult. So we're not going to see many 2017s coming forward. We'll see a few Blanc de Blancs, and the one thing that really surprised me with this champagne, and it's nice to see as it is today, is it does have purity. And you know, they had terrible trouble. There was a third of this was Pinot Noir, a third of it was Meunier. But their vineyards, they seem to have managed them very well, and they seem to have got very clean fruit, because there's not anything but lovely, pure, rich aromatics. And you see that peachy, rich, red fruit blast coming forward on this. The Chardonnay is only a third. You see it behind. There's a little bit of ripeness here, actually. There's some lovely pineapple-iness. Zero dosage, so the amazing thing with what I call really nicely made zero dosage champagnes is that they don't seem zero dosage, and I think this one's classic. Since Essie can't be here, I did find that she's written a note, and I'm going to just read this. This is her tasting note. So if she was here, I hope she'd have said something similar to this. She's written, beautifully soft, ripe fruity nose, with red and yellow fruits intermingling. The bone dry palate is super fresh and yet textured, with the plushness meeting energizing nervosity. Impressively creamy, outstanding effort from the notorious 2017. So I'm pleased to see Essie was quite impressed that it is a lovely clean expression of a champagne from 2017. So delicious fruit, actually. It's coming out now. Now it's been open a little bit longer. I understand Essie's used that word energizing nervosity. You know, it does have this quite exciting feel. They've done some lovely work with the texture in this. Most of the wines in Leclerc Briant harvest, let's say August, September time. They actually don't do their bottling and blending until much later in the year. It's typically July time. So there's a little bit more time sort of on the lees, contact in the tank. And I think that really shows in this wine. And that's really helped build layers. To me, it's better and better and better. There is also, from this year, a Rosé Abyss has just come out. Tiny quantities. Hence, we haven't got one here today. But if you love the Abyss champagnes, do try the Rosé. It's super good. And the Rosé is from the 2018. Now, that's the Abyss for you. I think the second champagne is their vintage. This is Leclerc Briant Vintage 2016. And here we've got 50% Pinot Noir, 35 Chardonnay, and 15 Meunier. And it's 3 grams. So disgorged in March 22. So relatively short time post disgorgement. And one of the things that's also worth saying about all the wines from Leclerc Briant is they are organic, they are biodynamic, and they're vegan friendly as well. So let's try the 2016, a different vintage. They had much less trouble that they did in the 17. So it was a little bit awkward in the spring, and then there were some rot early in the year. But once it got to August time, the weather really turned around. And so a lot of the champagnes we'll start to see from 2016 have this quite plush fruit. So if you remember the vintages of 12 and 14, you've got this great sort of bundle of fruit. And the most of the 16s, they will have pretty good refreshing acidity in them as well. So let's give this one a little go. Now it's quite different. Isn't that funny? There's more, actually the percentage of red and white is roughly the same as the Abyss. But the most amazing thing with this one is there's a real blast of beautiful red fruit, actually. I wasn't expecting that, and the yellow fruit's a little bit more subdued. So it's Extra Brut, you can feel that. 3 grams. It's just giving some beautiful sort of rounding to the wine, which is really, really nice. And it's got these layers of fruit. I am now starting to pick up the yellow fruits, which is nice because I didn't pick them up so much on the aromatics. But since Essie can't be with me, I'm going to read you her tasting note. So here's the other big. I'm glad I'm reading Essie's note because this is the other big difference. This vintage cuvée shows fine vinosity of oak fermented wine, but there is always an impeccable freshness and sensation of energy and tension. Thanks, no doubt, to the bioenergetic approach of Chef de Cave Hervé Geston. On the delicious fruity nose, sweet raspberries meet ripe apple, kumquat and yellow plums. A fruit basket, really, but there are also peach stones and earthy spicy qualities. The palate is rather structured, and you can feel the oak impact a little more. Lovely vinosity and freshness continuing until the long, dry finish. Well, I think Essie's rather summed it up rather brilliantly, so I'm just going to give it a little smell. The fascinating thing, because this has had some, this has been barrel fermented and left in the barrels, it's got a beautiful rich colour. The percentage of new oak must be very small because, you know, you've just got a lovely oak texture rather than the big oak impact. If I had to choose, which we always do on our videos, I'll ask Essie which one would she prefer. Just out of, just so you know, Essie scored the Abyss 92 and the Vintage 2016 91. So she did slightly favour the Abyss. And I can see why, because I think there's perhaps some other layers in there that are really fascinating. So happy Friday, everybody. I hope we brought you some interesting information again. Leclerc Briant, their Abyss, and their Vintage 2016. Happy Friday. Cheers.